Okay, can everybody see this okay from over there and everything?
Yeah.
All right, you gotta get the mouse out of my pocket. It's a cat toy.
He's got a mouse in his pocket.
I know, yeah.
I think it's cat.
How many people here have seen the Hammonton presentation when we did it last? Or have seen it with the Historical Society? Kathy, you didn't, oh, you were out of town. Yeah. Anyways, this picks up where that left off. As you know, the Hammonton was a big munitions place during the First World War at the very end. And when it was all over and torn down, there was a whole lot of land available. So, what is it, 8 years after Hammonton was started, all of a sudden there was a new purpose for the land that it sat on. And that is Atlantic City Speedway, which was at the time the fastest racetrack in the world, sat out in that land. So why did they pick, why pick Hammonton for the site? Very easy. All of a sudden, they were in the era of the 20s when people had automobiles and mobility was so vastly increased. They could go places that they wanted to. Atlantic City, of course, was the calling card for vacationers and everything else at the time. And the Indianapolis 500 continued to grow in stature out in Indiana. Board track racing was a phenomenon because it was cheap to build, and pavement hadn't really been developed yet to the extent of being able to, because Indianapolis was bricks, let's keep that in mind, okay? Otherwise, it was bricks, or yes, that's why they called it the brickyard. Originally it was all paved with brick. Now there's only 3 feet of brick at the start finish. So that was becoming a big deal. Indy was. Board track racing started really on the West Coast. A lot of little small tracks mostly, but then out in the Los Angeles area it was really big. And but it spread around the country, and eventually it came east to New Jersey. The American Automobile Association, same people who do all the safety stuff and maps and everything else, they were the sanctioning body for racing in the US at that time. There was no NASCAR, there was no USAC, there was no CART, there wasn't any of those things back then. And so it was sanctioned by the American Automobile Association, and they promised the developers that they would have a 250-mile exclusive radius surrounding Hammonton, where no other competing racetrack of this stature could be built. And why was that? Why the 250, first of all, and why Hammonton? Very simple. 20% of the nation's population lived within.
Sorry.
There we are. Lived within 150 miles of Hammonton. That's why they chose this. It was right in the center. So it drew from all the states around. Very interesting to note this 250-mile radius. If you measure it out, when you get up to Rockingham, New Hampshire, where there was one track that lasted a year, it's about 250 miles away, just outside the thing. It burned, and then it became a horse race track from that point onward only. And as we said before, 3,000 acres of land were available for use. Whoops. The corporate name, I didn't go 2 slides, I think that was it. Yeah. Okay, the corporate name for this, the people who invested in it, was the Atlantic City Motor Speedway Association. It was incorporated in Delaware, interestingly enough. Now the investors, the principal investor was Charles M. Schwab, not the Schwab that you're used to for investments these days. This guy was probably a whole lot bigger, actually. He was Bethlehem Steelworks, the chairman of that, And I think he then went on to do US Steel, all kinds of crazy stuff. But he was a steel magnate building a wooden track, why not, right? So these guys here, if you look them up, there's hardly anything written about them. But these were the four principal investors. The track design and construction, as I mentioned about the California thing, Art Pillsbury was the man, if you will, for designing tracks, and Jack Prince was the construction and contractor. They both started with bicycle, it's a velodrome, essentially. The racetrack is almost like a velodrome, just made bigger. So they started in that, and together, working together, they actually had done 10 previous board track racetracks before Atlantic City Speedway. So this was their 11th and final effort. There were articles that talked about, here it comes, and they actually got the date wrong. It says May 11th. Turns out the first race was on May 1st of 1926. But the press had quite a field day promoting the event. The facility itself, 1.5 mile track length. It was the longest at that time. And crazy enough, it was 45-degree banking. Now we talk about Daytona and Talladega and everything else these days, they didn't even come close. This was 45 degrees. And 50-foot wide racing surface, and it was designed for speeds up to 160 miles an hour. Barely 30 years after the automobile really got going, at all. It took 453 rail cars of Southern Hemlock and Engelmann spruce for the track alone to build this thing. The grandstands were 90 feet tall. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but they had a capacity of 60,000 people. That's like 10,000, or that's like 10 times the population of Hammonton at the time. Okay, so this thing was no small venture at all, needless to say. 150 additional loads of lumber, rail cars, were used for the grandstand. So altogether, about 6 million board feet of lumber. I was gonna do the calculation, laying them end to end, but they're probably different, just see if it went around the world or not, but it probably came darn close, or at least across the country and beyond. They were parking for 60,000 automobiles. Now remember when we talked about Amotol? Yes, John?
Since you mentioned the rail cars, did they still have that spur that came from the main?
Yeah, most of a lot of the spurs that used to come in were still active, or they reactivated them. You'll see when we get to an overhead picture, a lot of them are still there, but up around all the manufacturing plants, they've been pulled out. But the main siding off the Pennsylvania Railroad still went up in there, yeah. 60,000 automobiles. The rail sidings, which we just kind of refers to that, could hold 8 to 10 passenger trains of spectators. They came in from all directions. Okay, and you'll see, they just kind of line them up nose to tail. Additional standing room only for 200,000 people. So we talk about 60,000 in the stands. They actually talk about 250, but I backed it down. I just couldn't believe 250,000. Yes,
Did they actually get that much in attendance? Did they
No.
ever keep attendance records?
no. Oh yeah, they did.
Oh, but they didn't?
I'll get to it.
Okay. Only that you mentioned.
First event, first and the biggest event of all, 80,000 people.
Okay.
Total cost, $1 million. Today it would be in excess of 17 million to build that track. Burdick's Garage, and I'm a little bit hesitant on this because I don't, things may have moved or something, but Burdick's Garage was where the bus stops came in, okay, and they fueled up and went back to Philadelphia when it was all over. Most came down, some came up, of course. Moss Mill Road, which really didn't fully exist until after, or it was interrupted by Amatol, now went straight through just below the track, and it was widened to 66 feet. It was 35 feet. So they basically doubled the size of Moss Mill, kind of to where it is today, probably with the shoulders. And there was a Speedway, New Jersey station. They actually had a post office. They didn't have zip codes, but they also did that too. So you could get a little postcard and have it stamped with Speedway, New Jersey. That was right there where the where the sidings are and everything, back there in the woods. Everybody okay so far?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
No, look at that.
The construction. This is while the construction was underway. As you can see, a lot of boards have been either cut off or staged there. Up through here, these are all piles of wood that are sitting there staged to be put onto the track, to provide the surface of it. My understanding is the surface itself was 2x4s laid on their edge. Obviously you get into much larger lumber on the side here for this main thing, but when you put all those 2x4s together like that, it's pretty darn strong. This is a little picture, one of 3 that I found in the bottom of a box in the Historical Society, taken by a private individual. Here's a great shot of the lumber piles coming out of what we would call turn 3 and 4, coming down the main stretch. This is when they were building, very similar to that last picture that showed all these uncut pieces up here. But that's for the workmen to put down. And this also, from the same set of pictures, this can be nothing, in my mind, this can be nothing but a trial run on that Speedway by one guy, went out and tried it out. As you can see, there's virtually nobody here. The lumber's still piled there, hadn't cleaned it up yet.
Yeah.
And so it's either a Duesenberg or a Miller, I'm not sure exactly which it is. Those were the primary cars that ran that day, those days, and they were legendary in themselves.
Did you take a microscope to look? That one guy with the hand out, it almost looks like he's holding a stopwatch.
Probably is, yeah. He looks like he's ready to do this. And yeah, I'd never noticed that, but it's gotta be, yes. So some people just came and hung out, I think, to watch what was going on, and here we are. And same thing here. Again, nobody in here at all. There's still wood piles everywhere, and they haven't even finished the scoreboard here by the looks of it. They're either painting it, or it looks like it's filled in, but that's probably where they're gonna drop numbers in too, for who's in what position, but they haven't lettered off, put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the top. So those are priceless pictures.
That was a great find, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing what we find in boxes. Yes, John?
Frank, those pictures are interesting because, there's such a lack of trees. Was the site itself pretty much clear cut?
Of the 64, kind of a trick answer. Of the 6,400 acres of Amatol, only about 400 and some odd acres had to be cleared. Okay, for Amatol, 10 years or 8 years earlier. Now, when you get down towards Elwood, where the homes for Amatol were, there was lots more trees, and they left. They kept as many as they could. But over the horizon, the track horizon, you don't see many trees.
Yeah.
Cause that first cut from the 1800s and everything, it still already stripped the land, so there wasn't a whole lot still sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the laying of the track. You can see all these 2x4s, they're all kind of going in an angle. If you lay them like that, you can pretty much keep them straight, but it's, you know, they go around the corner at an angle like that, and it takes, obviously, every time you're laying a board, you're only gaining, back then, with a true 2x4, you're only gaining 2 inches every time you, up to 50 feet, so you can do the math on that one, how many it takes.
Were they nailed together or bolted together?
They would have to be nailed, I would think. We've had people that said they, as a little kid, they walked around with buckets of nails for the workers. And if they used bolts, then they wouldn't be able to get them all the way together. You know, so they had to go in one by one, you know, like that. And if you're going down 4 inches, I think the bulk of them are probably nailed to each other. You know, I don't know how you, unless you know, tie them in at the bottom like
I
that.
wonder what size nails they would have used.
Don't know. I wish I knew.
You know, 10 penny.
I would assume they're gonna be big, you know, big, as a kid, I called them big spikes, but yeah, probably 10 penny.
That would be interesting to know.
Yeah, but, yeah, people whose fathers, grandfathers lugged nails, that's what they use. Now, I imagine they probably bolted those uprights and everything for the structures. They would have to go through a, you know, 8x8 or whatever the heck they use to go vertical with. Kathy, that's your next project, find out what.
I was just thinking that.
All right, now all this stuff was started on February 15th of 1926. And the completion date was April 28th.
Oh my God. Wow. That was quick.
Talk about the nick of time, okay? May 1st was the first race. So 10 weeks, I figured, from start to finish. So just like Hammonton, it was built kind of overnight, so to speak, in terms, in those kind of terms, if
How
you will.
many workers did it take to do all that?
I've never seen the number.
Had to be a lot.
Had to be a lot, yep. So here is a thing that talks about, and they don't talk about how many worker, they talk about executive capacity. Well then, that's 500 people for executives, but I don't know, they must have had some special seats for them. But even that one doesn't mention how many workers. And you can see here, now, remember what I said about the grandstand being 90 feet in the air? Here is probably going into, either coming out of turn 3 or going into turn 1. This alone probably was 40 feet up in the air, okay? The cars are whipping by at about 25 feet in the air, at 100 and in the corners, 135 probably. But look way up here,
Yeah.
okay? All right, now, I'm jumping ahead, but if you go to the right place on Moss Mill Road, which is where I'll tell you later, imagine just stopping the car, looking up at the back of a 90-foot high grandstand, extending 2,000 feet. Yes.
What was the base? What was that 40 feet built on?
They ran, I guess wooden piles. I mean, they all use wood, but they went down. If you walk the track today, if you walk the pathway, all right, when you walk the pathway out there, you're walking the edge of the apron way at the bottom. The track then was way up here, okay? So, but if you look through the woods, especially through the turns where they built this thing, you know, way up high for the banking, you will see the remnants of a berm about 60 feet over, okay? And that's where the primary verticals went on the outside.
rather than it being dug down.
Right, it wasn't dug down at all. No, not at all. It was built on top. Yeah.
So Greg, this is on Morse Mill before you get to Elwood or after Elwood?
Before.
You're giving away all the secrets. 1.9 miles. At 1.9 miles, when you get off of White Horse Pike, stop the car. You will see a little.
On Morse Mill?
On Moss Mill.
Okay.
Exactly 1.9. You will see a little tiny road that goes to the right. You've all seen little openings in the woods.
Yeah.
Most of them have, no hunting or no trespassing or whatever, or just the park, the park signs. But at 1.9 miles, there's the remnants of a road, and there's also a break. There's a break in the woods with 2 posts. There's a little parking area right next to where the road comes out to Moss Mill Road on the right. Park your car there, walk in there, and you're basically walking into the start-finish line.
Oh, wow.
Okay, which we'll get to. There'll be more detail. We'll cover
Well,
more.
you're making it very intriguing.
Yeah.
I would like to have I wouldn't mind doing a walk in the woods again.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Um,
That was awesome.
And,
Some of that.
cause it is interesting, and there are 6 Amitol buildings within the circumference of the track.
Still?
Yeah, the ruins. Yep. I have pictures of those actually in here too, not in today's thing, but I could go back to them.
Maybe we should not do it in
No
tick season.
sand jiggers.
Yeah, well, that's it, is juggling the tick season. We went on a beautiful sunny day in
Sand jiggers.
January, when it turned out to be 40-something degrees.
that's
Oh,
the
it was
day.
beautiful, it was perfect, but you
Yeah.
gotta time it just right.
Yes, exactly.
Now, for those who have seen the Amitol presentation, these were all the scars left from the railroad tracks and the buildings, 10 years later, or don't know when this was actually shot. But, here is the Speedway, which only occupied a very small part of the Amitol facility.
Yeah.
This is 1.5 miles around. Just imagine how big the Amitol thing was. Okay. Now, this is when the Speedway was intact, certainly, because there we go around, there's some shadowing probably, from the light and everything. Here's your grandstand, that real dark line, okay? And here's little Moss Mill Road right there. White Horse Pike is there, and actually right here, right there is the State Police Administration Building, which was also the administration building for Amitol. I mean, that's how it started, was the Amitol Administration Building. So that gives you perspective a little
The
bit.
way that looks though, if that is the White Horse Pike where you said to the bottom,
Mhm.
if you're driving from Hammonton, it seems like when you get to that point, it would be to the left of Morse Mill. If you're heading
what-
east.
East this way, Moss Mill is to the left of White Horse.
Right, well, yeah,
Yeah.
you're showing. So if White Horse is at the bottom
Yep.
Yeah.
and Morse Mill's just above it, so it seems like it would be a left turn.
Oh, when I told you to park the car?
Yeah.
No, that's just to find a parking lot.
Oh, that's the part.
Here's where you walk in, right there. Okay, so you come down Moss Mill, you park to the right, walk across the street and walk into the woods,
Oh, okay, all right.
okay?
Okay.
Now, that crazy little road that goes off into the woods, across where you're parking, that actually was like the main entrance to the Speedway at
And
one
is that where the
point,
buildings
before it
are?
all grew back in. Remember, this was all dirt at the time,
Yes.
so everything got a whole lot smaller over time as things grew in.
So back in the day, the main road to get there, you would take the White Horse and then make the turn to get.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Yeah, Moss Mill was there and went through,
Right.
but you'll see what you faced here shortly in either situation. This is just the end of the Speedway, again, showing more of of the old scarring from Ammonton. Here's some of the railroad lines. Those were all railroad lines, because
Wow.
again, there was 50 miles of railroad track within Ammonton itself. Magnolia, one of the references to Ammonton, there was Magnolia Camp for workers. It's right in that area. Whoops, I think I went too. Another perspective. Here's the track, there's the grandstand, there's Moss, what is now Moss Mill, and there's the administration building, the state highway, or the state police.
All right.
Yep. So here's that road, if you will, that came through the woods to Moss Mill.
Okay.
These were, if you wanted to get to the infield, this is where you went. These are big entrances that go through tunnels right here, and right up in here, there's another tunnel. And you can see, to this day, you can see the dip as you're walking the path where the tunnel was underneath. It's kind of filled in with dirt and leaves, and gradually the soil level has come up. But it's very clear. We were down in here. You could very clearly see where the tunnel was when we walked it. And this is the little place. What gets me is this building is directly across from the administration building, where Burdick's is farther down. The bus stop is further down. So there's a disconnect there somewhere, but this looks more like a place where buses would pull in.
What's that long white strip to the left?
This?
Right, yeah, right in there, it looks like a airport or something.
Yeah, you probably could land a plane on it. That was an entry. That was one of the entries that went into the track
Okay.
under the fourth turn and into the infield. Remember, the infield could hold up to 200,000 people. So you might want to drive your car in there if you bought the standing room only and park in the infield to watch. Ammonton, this was all Ammonton things. This is all parking. This is parking lots for the events. Obviously starting more in here, but these are left over from the camps of Ammonton, all those little divisions out there. Again, close up, there's your grandstand, how mammoth the thing is. And the buildings that are there now are right in here. There's 2 there, and there's 4 of them kind of clustered in here. Unfortunately, the existing photographs of the Speedway in its day don't quite show that area as well as they could. But they're definitely from Ammonton. All right, opening day, May 1st, the big day. It's a 300-mile race. National championship was it was part of that series, and they talk about 20 world famous drivers, yada yada, and they give the times. How to get to Atlantic's to Speedway, New Jersey. Okay, is on the famous White Horse Pike, midway between Philadelphia and Atlantic City. That'll get you there, right? You figure it out from there. And by train, it talks about there. Then, if that wasn't there, the predecessor to Google Maps is this published map here that shows Philadelphia and Atlantic City, and somewhere in there's a track. So you're on your own once again. If you're on that route, you're heading there. So it didn't, those were simpler times, needless to say. And these were all dirt roads, of course, back then again. Now, here we go. This is opening day again. Where do you want to start? There's one train, and there's more over here too. There's another train right to about there. There's another train right to about there, with just enough room for people to walk in front or drive in front. There's another one. This one may be a big one here. Looks like another engine or car there. There's one train starting there. There's another one to here, and assorted things here, and then probably more down in there too. So they just parked and hung out. The rest of the trains were still running to Atlantic City and back all day long. And these were typically specials that ran to the track.
Where was the station for that place?
Not exactly sure. I think it was down in here, but I have not seen it located on a map. But there was a station. I had there's one picture that I saw of the station that said Speedway, New Jersey, but it doesn't tell you exactly where. But it was either here or there's no buildings here that would. These are all cars. So I gotta believe it's just off the picture, perhaps, on the main siding that came in, the first siding, you know, before you got into the loop. Have you ever heard of anything, you know, location-wise
No,
yourself?
but I have two of the signs from the railroad that says Amatoil. They're about that long, kind of termite eating and stuff like that, that they had at each end of to get onto the main line.
I love termites, if you ever wanted to sell any of those. I got a huge railroad stuff collection in the basement. Or donate it to you're supposed to say, please donate it to the museum when you're ready. Wow, that's outstanding, because I would love to have the Speedway, New Jersey sign, but who knows where that went.
I'm sorry, the wide white, is that an overpass over the railroad?
That's actually that's the main entrance that we pointed out before. So when you walked in, where you park your car on Moss Mill Road down in here, this takes you right into the Speedway at 1.9 miles down Moss Mill Road. That was that straight in entrance into the middle of it. Yes, John?
Could you point out where the White Horse Pike in relationship?
This would have been White Horse.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that would be White Horse, and then Moss Mill is up closer here. There you go. Here's Moss Mill. Okay? Now, these are all cars. This is all parking lot. Look at this. It looks like there's maybe little parking signs, you know, for row A, row B, whatever. They might have done that. I don't know for certain, but it's funny how they're either that or just old campsites that never grew in again. Now, here's a problem. You park and you fill all these parking lots, right? Think about it. What color were cars back then? Uh-huh. How in the heck do you find your car? Especially if you own a Model T. Or Model T morphing into the others at that time. But the vast majority of people probably had, you know, Fords and Chevys and things like that. That could be tough. You didn't hang something off the...
I'd be there for a year.
Yeah. So what did you do? You did this instead. This is, I think this is White Horse, because there's, no, I take it back now, because there should be an entrance if it was there. This is either Moss Mill or White Horse, but you can see everybody's parking along here. There's buses parked in there. It was probably a royal mess. But you probably had a little better chance of finding your car this way. I don't know if they paid for parking or not, if there was any people holding out for that or not, but it was quite an event, needless to say.
What did
Now-
it cost to go see a race?
We'll get there. Yeah. Anywhere from $2.40 on up.
That was then, that was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money. That's
Yeah.
one of the downfalls that I'll get.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how much?
Yeah. Now, serious question. If you were buying tickets and you saw these guys in line in front of you, would you want to go in?
No,
This was normal though. That's just normal dress back then. But they look like
gangsters.
yeah. Yeah, they're waiting for tickets there. This is out of the program. I actually brought a copy of the program with me. You know, they talked about the Harry Hart's was big. Peter DiPaolo was a huge name back there.
Oh, good shot.
Now, we have a big poster of this in the museum right now. This is a great shot. And again, not a ton of trees up through here. That's kind of looking, this is probably taken from quite a ways up the grandstand, needless to say. Everybody in here is wearing a hat, just about.
Yeah, see that,
Okay.
like that.
Yeah.
Nice too.
Now, where you walk, when you walk the path around the track right now, you're way back in here. Okay?
Okay.
Because then when they tore it down, all the trucks were running back and forth and that same, beating that down and everything was being tossed down and whatever. And it stayed that way where some growth had already started under the stands probably before it was torn down. So that's your pathway, way in the middle, and you can see how high this thing goes up in the air. There's that's just a spot there, but this is when they're just kind of getting ready, maybe starting to pull away for the, on the starting or the formation lap or something like that. More of the same type pictures. There's the scoreboard filled in. And again, the buildings are over here, the first set of buildings, so you don't see them. There's quite a few people in the infield. The Hammonton racetrack near Hammonton, and this was just a newspaper thing. That's probably smoke. Either smoke or exposure or both. That is definitely smoke. Some of them were like that. Now you see how the grandstand, as you got down near the end, when the banking was coming down, the grandstand kind of curved up a little bit so that everybody still had a great view. So that would have been at the very start. People are still filling in. Now these, this was these were in the museum. This was Anthony DeMarco's father-in-law took these. They say Elwood 1930, well, it didn't exist in or they didn't race in 1930. So it would have been, the inaugural would have been in 26. So they're a little bit off on their dates. But these are home pictures. Same kind of thing, and not bad at all. Now all these shots with race cars, I had to compare the car numbers where I could see them and the actual entry list for the various years to make sure I got them in the right spot. So I know that it's inaugural or whatever, pushing them off to get them started. Pit stops, probably during the race. There's a lot of cars right up to the fence. Nothing's changed there in terms of that sort of thing. Get right close to the track if you can. Again, these are not the same buildings, but there are some, they must have had a garage area back there because every so often you see that same picture. Now here's the back stretch, back there. More pit stop things, very similar to the home picture that was there. This would have been, I guess, towards the probably as the race was going on, and then that's a great shot there. You can see how this ultimately was finished off all the way around. So they had a guardrail. Yeah, I guess the main object was you tried to stay within these two white lines, and that was the official race surface. This was more like an apron. On the West Coast, they had some bad accidents and stuff on the smaller things where they went through the guardrails and stuff on little things. They never had a major accident here that nobody was killed or anything, and they raced motorcycles, cars, and bicycles too. You'll see. There's just another picture. Again, look at the trees there. Nothing, hardly anything. Just a few sticking up. And there's Harry Hartz crossing the finish line. Harry Hartz was a big name. He was kind of the bridesmaid at Indianapolis for a number of years. Also, he never won there, I don't think, or did he win once? I can't remember. I had a helmet with his name on it with about 30 other drivers one time. There's Smiling Harry there, and this is the kind of stuff where you can research, what happened to each of the individuals in the race. The pole speed was 142.9 miles an hour. That compared to Indianapolis pole of about 123 miles an hour at that time. Okay, so this was a whole lot faster than Indianapolis. Again, just more results. I won't bore you with those details. There's Harry. That's a great picture of Harry. So he raced into the 50s, I think it was. Now, here's where they say 80,000 were at that first race. Harry Hart's, back then, again, because of the AAA, they timed everything, and it was, always a world record. So he set a record for a 300-mile speed test, as it were. And at that 142 miles an hour thing. And then, again, more records dropping there. That was a big deal then. King of the Wooden Way, and he was from California, as were many of the participants back then. There's a copy of that on the table here. This is just a certificate, again, from the American Automobile Association, saying that he got this record. Now, for those, it's only 122 cubic inches on those great big Mercedes or Duesenbergs and Millers. They weren't big, and but they went pretty fast because they were almost like a soapbox derby car with an engine in it. As far as they were very skinny. All right. In July of that year, of course, it was the sesquicentennial of the country, and so they had a special event there. There's just a picture of the ad, and here's a little the payout. First place for the they had for the first 60 miles, next 60, almost like stages as we know now, and then it doubled for the final. So if you add all those up, it's like $1,250 for the winner. Excuse me, 12,500.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Yep. And so just that they did things a little different because they had cars broke down and stuff. So this is again talking about the event tomorrow, which is the day before. There's a Duesenberg with 122 cubic inch displacement. That's like 2 liters, pretty close to 2 liters. That was probably one of the guidelines there. This was just an entry list for that same race. And this was the second, this was that second year, actually. That car, number 12, is over on the table there, basically. And now, here's a nice picture down into the first corner, but the buildings are still, it's 2 buildings, but it's either 2 buildings behind this, or that looks suspiciously like an Amitol building, but if it was cut off later to half the size. Because what's over there now has about 10 windows to it. 10 of these open, they were actually docks where they could load up freight cars. So they may have chopped this up in half, and that may be what's sitting in that corner with another twin next to it, which is out of sight. But that's a cool picture, just showing that perspective down into that end of the track. There's that car. He came out and set a single speed record that day. They introduced stock car racing. They had that. So Auburn's, Buick, Chevys, Chryslers, Dodge, Duesenbergs, Hudson, LaSalle, Nash, Packard, Stars. I never heard of that one. Studebaker, Stutz, and Whippets. So those were many of the companies that existed back then that most of which are long gone by now. And another article. And so what did they do with that? Well, they made lots of headlines with it. So Auburn really milked it to a great degree. They ran 75 miles in 52 minutes and 10.77 seconds, averaging 86 miles an hour. These are just normal cars with the fenders taken off and the lights pulled off. And this was what they called a stock car. It was a lot more stock than today's thing. Again, Studebaker was out there with some of their entries too. That's the only accident picture I found. They said the one guy hurt his shoulder, and, cause there were two people in it. And I don't know where the rest of the body went, but it's, it's gone, the whole back end of the body. So, they got a little shaken up on that one. And this is a little tiny little Dodge, a real small motor Dodge that won its special event, its class. Now, beyond auto racing, they had air shows with trapeze people hanging off the, the airplanes like you see in the old pictures. Skywriting, parachute jumping, and they had balloons, motorcycle races, bicycle, and I've never heard of this before, ambulance races. Now the big question is whether or not Hammonton had an ambulance in that race, because the old funeral car from Prash, did I say that right? Prash Funeral Home became a fire wagon. And I don't know if it morphed through an ambulance phase or not, but you never know what was running as ambulances either at that time. So I wish I could get a photograph of that. That would have to be in a private set of photos somewhere. Yes?
Frank, I'm not real knowledgeable about it, but I remember a few years ago reading that up where Atlantic Care Emergency or facility is now, didn't somebody build custom small car manufacturing at one time there?
If so, I personally have not heard about that. It's possible.
I think when the news about Atlantic Care taking over those buildings, and I think one of the buildings, people asked in Hammonton about saving it.
Yeah, I mean, Arena owned.
It's Rainier, right? Pete Rainier.
Rainier, I'm sorry, Rainier.
Right.
Yeah, Rainier
They
owned
made a
that
custom
property.
car there at one time?
No, I think that
mean,
was their residence, wasn't it?
Yes, it was their
dealership.
residence.
Yeah, it was a dealership.
Where Atlantic Care is now was the homestead for Rainiers.
Right.
And they owned the dealership. But I don't remember any notice
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
that.
They didn't
paper,
build
there was
anything.
something about,
Yeah.
at one time, it was, they were building cars for sale. Building here in Hammonton,
I didn't
a
know.
model, but I guess they were
Yeah.
very small.
Now,
I just wondered if they ended up, any information about
Yeah,
that
Rainier,
reason.
Rainier's dealership started in, it's either 1900 or 1901. So he was one of the very first to sell cars. They may have had things that came in, some things in kit form, that they
Yeah.
kinda, from various manufacturers. He did have one, I can't think of the name right now, cause I'm doing a consolidated timeline of Hammonton history, pulling in everything, books, files, papers, everything, putting in one great big huge document. I'll probably be dead before
Big
it's done.
project.
It's already 80 pages, but he had some strange brand at first. And so whether or not there was some assembly required at that point, they may have shipped them in crates,
Yeah.
with the wheels off, that kind of thing. That's the only thing I could say to that, yeah. Rainier actually really frosted some of the farmers in town. When there were fires in town, the city put out $5 to whoever showed up with a horse team first.
Oh,
So when the fire thing rang, everybody grabbed the horses and go downtown or wherever, or out there, until Pete Rainier showed up with his automobile and started pulling the fire wagons. That kind of frosted the farmers. Yes,
The cars that you're showing,
yes.
and the one over there,
Mhm.
it seems like, did they do any sort of safety improvement by racing the cars? Because the one crash you showed, I don't know how it happened, but,
What safety?
what's that?
What safety?
Well, like if you have a convertible now, don't they have that safety bar?
Oh, yeah.
If the car flips over.
Roll
because-
bars weren't mandated till around 1960 or so.
Yeah, cause that's what I'm saying, if they flipped over, the
Yeah.
guy's gonna break his neck if it's upside down.
Yeah.
There's nothing there to help him.
Your best bet at that time, which many people hung on to for the longest Must have get thrown in.
Jeez. But then
No.
nobody do it to improve on it, huh?
No,
Wow.
no. A few started tying ropes around each other in the forties and so, but nothing, after the war, when seat belts came
Mhm.
from airplanes and stuff, they started using some, but they weren't mandated until, quite a ways down the road.
Okay.
So anyways, lots of other stuff going on at the track. There's your picture of the bicycle race. Probably the one and only bicycle race, I don't know. But
What year was that?
that still would have been 1926 to 28, probably, I would guess, if I didn't look, but, there's one driver, I can't tell who this is. This may be Hill, I'm not sure. But I could probably tell you if I just look at an entry list for the cars, because those are the drivers, and it's either Wonderlick or something, whatever, was way at the back here, and I remember seeing that in other shots, so I could tell you if you really wanted to know. 1927, the sophomore year, the manufacturers again saw more and more opportunity to promote their things. Guest appear, we invite the public to be our guest, whatever, to see this race, Studebaker Day, okay? So they really tried to jump on anything they could. This was the big race on May 7th, now a little bit further into May this time around, and that was one of the worst things they ever did. It was bad enough when they ran May 1st, and I'll get into that. But again, Miller's, Duesenberg's, and Mercedes, or at least one Mercedes there, and some other crazy things that you've never heard of too. Frank Lockhart made a run in 1927, 147 miles an hour, and at that time he was 25 miles an hour faster than Indy Bull. Okay. There's Lockhart in the Miller Special, which also, this particular one I think was front wheel drive. Miller's, they did them both ways, and this one's front wheel drive, I do believe. Lockhart won a bunch of races in 26, and to talk about the pine boards and all this kind of stuff. And there's a reference to, this is in the Board Track Racer book. They make reference to Atlantic City, one of the few references to the Speedway.
Greg, would you mind going back to the previous? What's that last line on there?
Yeah, 33 years would pass until 1960 before another driver would lap an American super speedway at a faster speed.
Oh my God.
Held a record for 33 years.
That
Wow.
was something.
Mhm.
Wow.
That would have been maybe Charlotte probably, or
That's
something like that, or
That's a long time.
maybe Indy.
I'll say.
Yeah.
Would have been one of the earlier speedways, certainly. Auburn went and started in after their racing they set all kinds of records, and they pretty much crushed everything up to 42,000 miles. So they would go out there with like 4 cars and just run them and run them and run them. They did oil changes on schedule. They obviously gassed them, changed tires the old-fashioned way. It was really quite a deal, and everybody hung their hat on it. Yep, there we are. There's their ad from that thing. They did 42,000 miles in less than 40,435 minutes. And that's with the stops and everything included. The Auburn Cord, yeah, that's that car again.
Duesenberg, huh?
Now here is, this is undoubtedly one of those tests, because you just have a few little things, few cars in the infield while the other guys are running around. I can't tell if these are cars up here or not on the track, or even right in there, but it's certainly what,
Wow.
this is very conclusive. So there's a sedan running around, there's one guy back in the corner there, looks like there's definitely one back up in the corner, and again, just a handful of cars, so it's probably from the same day. And so they rented out the track for that purpose. Again, the Auburn 888 session, they ran typically the different body styles and then made a big deal out of it. Now this guy, This guy in this sedan, in number 3, he was doing great. But in the middle of the night, he fell asleep. He fell asleep. The driver was the sedan, in the middle of the night, the car skidded on the wet track. I mean, can you imagine running this on wet tracks during the
Oh,
rain?
my God.
And he skidded on the wet track, the sedan turned over, slid on its top, and crashed into the guardrail. The driver was unhurt, but 3 fenders, 2 doors, and a radiator and windshield were damaged. As you can see, he's hung up on the guardrail right there. And after inspection, the sturdy frame and the running gear were declared to be in perfect mechanical condition, and off they went.
That's when they built good cars.
Here he is at the end. A little behind the others, but he's there. He averaged 60 miles an hour for the whole deal. Again, the more publicity, there's changing, doing whatever they gotta do there. I don't know what he's doing way under the back there. I don't know what's under there to fix. And then Studebaker gets into it. Studebaker took everything up to 25,000 miles. The big question is, why didn't they keep going? They stopped, but they ended up beating the Auburn records. And this was the Commander's, that's the name of the car, the Studebaker Commander. And they made a huge deal out of it. There's a booklet over there about the thing. They started in the rain. You can see how slick it is there, and they finished in the rain too. And again, around and around and around, and this is with full fenders, headlights, everything. Pure right off the showroom. They got a little muddy because of the rain, as you can see. This is all part of the book. And then, believe it or not, this is the Atlantic City dealership, by the way. They were behind a lot of this, as kind of the factory thing or whatever. This is in front of the was it Hepburn Motors or something, perhaps, in Atlantic City. But that's the publicity shot there, and even getting the escort guy there too. And then the beginning of the end, 1928. Here's what began to happen.
Oh,
Okay, see that right there? You can actually see the depth of the wood there a little bit too. But rot, back then, remember, they didn't have preservatives for the wood.
Oh.
You put pine pitch or whatever on, but it's not the same as what we got now.
termites having a field day.
Could be underneath, it's probably very damp underneath, so they'd have to get with, separate these boards one by one and then put more in.
Oh, boy.
And had to be a nuisance. I don't know how you get the last board in without nails, just drop it in there. It must, go at an angle or something.
I'm sure the hardy New Jersey termite helped too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then final highlight, 1928, the Studebaker Presidents, which I think was the the deluxe model. They ran around, these guys got little windshields on it, and then there was two sedans in the back, so the 4 cars ran around, and they did 30,000 miles in 26,000 minutes, nonstop. Then the end. What happened? The entry fields, as it says, were modest. They only had about 20 cars on the biggest events, even the opening day. The biggest problem in my thing is they conflicted with the Indianapolis 500. Back then, Indy was a full month long, practically. Most of these guys come from the West Coast, so they're hauling 2,500 miles to here if they wanted to race here. And then what if something broke? What if they needed major repairs? This is no interstates, no nothing. You can't go all the way back, fix it, and come back in time to do any good at Indianapolis, where the payout is that much higher. So they really were, I think they were going after Indianapolis to their downfall, to a large degree. And you had Altoona's a big track also in Pennsylvania. They brought in, that was almost as big as here, it was 1.25 miles, I believe. So for West Coast teams, it was really kind of you gotta think about it hard. And even though Harry Hartz came from California, I don't know if he owned that car offhand or not, I'd have to look it up. So Indy had the upper hand in terms of the timing, certainly. They had the prestige, and they were more centrally located than here, obviously. Reasons why spectators never got there. Oh, I misspoke. Yeah, there it is. $2.20. I still misspoke. Grandstands, $4.20 to $15.40 for grandstand
Oh, boy.
people.
Wow.
All right.
That's a lot.
Yeah,
An awful lot.
as I say, for the working man or whatever, that's a big chunk of money.
Couldn't.
4,000 for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, there you go. Passenger train traffic was beginning to drop. You're right, at that same time, Blue Comet came along, and that was in an effort to get traffic back up even a couple years later. So it had already started because people had automobiles now. Board tracks were closing. This really was at the very end of the board track phenomenon. And you had, because of the little bull rings across in some of the other places, you had an outcry for safety. And the maintenance costs were high, as you can see, having to get in there. What if you gotta do the whole surface or the whole bottom part of the track? It's just a nuisance. And big thing was the AAA withdrew because of the safety things, okay? They said, hey, maybe we shouldn't be backing this, you know? The Great Depression was coming real quick, and so a lot of people were hurting. Charles Schwab just flat lost interest. Okay, we did that for a couple of years, now what, you know? And so they get bored easy as it was. And the expense of a 5-year track rebuilding, they thought at the time would be about $250,000. So they closed after the 1928 Labor Day races. Of the 24 board tracks built of any significance, only 4 remained in operation after Atlantic City Speedway. By 1932, they were all gone. Nobody was operating. It was done, and you're right in the middle of the Depression. The legacy, they did have 8 American, AAA sanctioned races in that short period of time, in those 3 years. Was then 1929. It was then sold to General Aero Corporation, who proposed the development of an international airport. So they thought they could put one here, and it did fail, so the track was never torn down at that point. 1932, the assets of the Speedway were auctioned off. They had some legal claims against them after deserting it, apparently. 1933, they started pulling it down, and they started selling lumber to whoever wanted lumber. And late in 33, the fire department had fun with it. And then the Colacerdos were then took down the remnants of it at that point. They got a contract for that. Here's the cool part. The AC Speedway lives on as a number of homes in this area. Supposedly, have lumber from the Speedway in them. In, floor joists, whatever, it could be any kind of thing. I guess you look for nail holes going sideways when there's no need for them. I don't know.
Termites, if it's not true.
Yeah, or termites. And that was supposed to be good lumber that they brought up too, it was supposed to be resistant, but it really wasn't. And then there's the thing about Colacerdo, I think it's in this article. No, maybe not, but anyways.
Yeah, PA
Is it?
Colacerdo.
Yeah, there it is, right there. PA Colacerdo, so 100 people went to work pulling it down. Today, first of all, the race cars look 100 times better than they ever did back in the day. The metal's straight, they're shinier, everything else. In 2006, Google Earth, there's the outline,
Yeah.
and these are still Ammitol scars up there from the railroad tracks. All right, there's more up here. There would be more things up in this area, but the outline was clearly visible in 2006, and in 2009, a farther away shot. There it is. And if you look real close, you'll still see some of the Ammitol things. It might have been little more growth, you know, at the time of year when they took this, I don't know. Here it is.
Okay.
I almost printed off this page, I probably should. 1.9 miles, park on the right, walk across the road, through the two posts, and imagine. Look up 90 feet, and 2,000 feet in front of you,
2,000 feet.
there's the grandstand. Walk to the pathway that was once the inside of this main straightaway. It's all crooked now, and they put up all kinds of barriers on the front to keep four-wheelers from going in. Once you get past that, you can walk the whole thing. Watch for the no trespassing signs, and when you do see them, don't talk, just walk. So nobody can hear
It
you.
doesn't say shoot on sight, does it?
No, I don't think so. You know, again, walk in there, imagine 60,000 people sitting
Oh my
behind
gosh.
you, 20,000 in front of you. And these things, these little engines would scream, you know, just imagine them whipping by. And again, 40 foot high in the turn, and if you were in a corner and when you walk that path, just watch, you know, see the cars going by like that, okay? It really had to be impressive. 100 years ago, and it's hard to imagine that it was like that. Here's some of the, real quick, I'll go through here. These are just some of the,
Oh, yeah.
now this is the back stretch here, because we had come by the middle of the track, we got here, and there's Deb there, and there's the beginning of that corner for turn two, if you will, you know?
Okay.
And way over in here is where you'll start, it's not so much, it's flattening out where we are here, but the track would have been over here,
Right.
and then right along this line, all the way around on the outside,
Wow.
you'll see traces of that berm. Yes, sir.
Being there's that many people went there, how many outhouses did they have to have?
Probably not enough.
I was gonna ask that, but I
I
was
mean, you
too
think about
embarrassed.
that, and
That's
then,
probably what they use the Hammonton buildings for.
and
I
food
don't
to
know.
eat and stuff like that, they had to have a restaurant or something.
Yeah, yeah,
People probably bought a lot of their lunches with them
Yeah.
at the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
We
at the
used to
time.
pack lunches
Yeah, used to
and
pack
everything.
The
them.
bus
you know,
stop,
back
of
in the
course,
day.
had some, had some
Yeah.
facilities, but good question.
These guys
But
were.
even in the Colosseum in Rome, they had sewage taken care of there.
Yeah,
The sewage is a big thing.
yeah.
He should be almost done.
There's one area of Ammitol, it's presumed to be from Ammitol, there is a big, long trench that is cement or whatever that may have been hooked up for plumbing purposes also. The sewer treatment plant for Ammitol was way up to the,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's, this is walking through the turn. And again, way back in here would be where the pylons or where the uprights would have been.
Yeah.
Here's coming through turn one, walking towards the start finish line. See this depression here?
Yeah,
That's where the tunnel came through, underneath there.
Oh.
So it's kind of filled in, but and see it kind of goes up in there. You look to the other side, and up through there was where those big wide, those big wide things came into the track.
I shouldn't get lost there.
Just follow the path.
Okay.
If you don't, you probably will get
Compass
lost.
with you, you will get lost.
All right, I'll bring you.
This is just another shot near that depressed area.
Oh, that's nice.
And this is, it's very walkable. The state police used to jog around there when they had their barracks.
Too much for me.
Me too.
There's lots of garbage, unfortunately. Lots of trash got thrown back in there before they.
That's a sin.
And so you see these idiots online, they say, "Oh, I found a tire, from from the track. It's this wide." No, it'd be about this wide if it was a real tire. They're finding garbage and sometimes calling
We used to
it.
dump in the old days.
Yeah. It's kind of sad. Yeah, so there's plenty of room, and
Beautiful house.
that's it.
Good job.
Great job, thank you. Oh, very interesting.
Any other questions at all?
question.
Yes.
Why was it called the Atlantic City Speedway?
Because they knew that would draw people.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Just like Atlantic City was drawing
Yeah,
people.
right.
Yeah. That's all. It was Atlantic City in name only.
Really?
Yep, yep.
Wow.
That was really great. I enjoyed that.
Good job.
I enjoyed your other one too.
That's my, oh, this is my hot button here.
You must have known all about this.